Do you believe truck and train traffic moving energy is safer than a pipeline, or do you think pipelines are safer than truck and train traffic?
I wish I could answer that question. I don't know what the answer is, Senator. I haven't seen those statistics.
So first, Senator Cantwell spoke about the Great American Outdoors Act. Turns out oil and gas development in the Gulf of Mexico is what funds about 90% of it. So when Senator Cantwell was asking you to commit to funding it, and at the same time there is a threat to that revenue stream, that's kind of a way you can't answer that correctly.
But we know what your stance is on replacing the revenue from the energy jobs, the jobs that power our economy and the energy that powers our country. And your preference is to turn to drugs, is what you've recommended to the voters. At a time when we know when there's high unemployment and energy workers lose their jobs, we've seen it in West Virginia, we've seen it around the country, there's been an opioid crisis in this nation. And yet what I hear from you is the answer in a better choice world is marijuana.
We have 200,000 miles of petroleum pipeline already in the ground in America. We have 2.4 million miles of natural gas pipeline already in America. There's a conversation about adding new lines that's gone on here frequently. Let me talk about existing lines that are already there. Generally, would you agree that federal agencies should work with pipeline companies to be able to keep rights of way up to date to ensure access to those pipelines already in the ground?
Thank you, Senator. It sounds like a reasonable idea.
Okay. In your understanding, does the Department of Interior have the authority to deny right-of-way renewals for existing pipelines that are compliant with all applicable laws and regulations?
Senator, where the Department of Interior has the authority over such issues, they would absolutely be important. And if I'm confirmed, absolutely take a look at that. And
do you think that the Department of Interior has the authority to deny an area where they have already an existing right-of-way, though, to go in and say that there's an existing pipeline already in this area? As you know, there's thousands of miles of pipeline that travel underneath federal lands right now. Do you believe the Department of Interior has the authority to be able to go in and say you no longer have right-of-way in these areas on federal lands for existing pipelines?
Senator, of course, I am not at the Department of Interior currently. I can't fully answer that question, but I would be happy to speak with you if I'm confirmed, and certainly I'm sure the department would be happy to give you an answer on that.
But do you believe that the Department of Interior should reevaluate existing pipelines under federal lands?
Again, Senator, I can't answer that question because I don't know what the answer is. But if I am confirmed, of course, it's important to you. I would be happy to speak with you.
It's actually important to every American that wants to stay warm in the winter. And for everyone that flies in a plane or drives a car, it becomes a pretty important issue because if we lose access to pipelines that are already in the ground, that go through federal lands or have right-of-way, we lose access.
And in fact, they ship 300,000 barrels a day, 300,000 barrels a day of their production through the Dakota Access Pipeline. The oil that they produce represents about 90% of their revenues. You know, this is what they use for their essential needs like education, healthcare, infrastructure, and really so many other things. Now, I have a statement from them, and in regard to the Dakota Access Pipeline, and I would ask that that be included in the record, Mr. Chairman.
No objection.
Congressman, given that the Mandan, Hidatsa, and Arikara Nation ships a significant portion of their oil through DAPL each day, wouldn't a shutdown of the pipeline have devastating economic consequences for them?
Senator, if I understand the question, you're asking if the oil pipeline shuts down, if it will have a devastating effect. Senator, I would be more than happy to, I don't know the specificity of every single job there, but I can tell you that I would be more than dedicated to being briefed on that issue if I am confirmed.
Well, they produce 300,000 barrels of oil a day. That represents 90% of the revenue, and a significant amount of that oil goes through the pipeline. So wouldn't it follow that if that pipeline shut down, that's going to have a major economic impact to them?
I understand what you're saying, Senator. Thank you.
Do you agree or disagree?
I don't disagree. I understand what you're saying. If something shuts down, then jobs can be lost, and I understand that. So thank you for sharing that with me.
Thank you, Congressman. Question in regard to the federal lands, and first, would you expect imports of foreign oil to go up or down if we stop developing oil and gas on federal lands?
Senator, I would absolutely, if I'm confirmed, ask to be briefed on this issue and would be more than happy to continue a conversation with you on it.
If we don't produce oil here, then it's logical that we're going to import more from places like Russia, Saudi Arabia, Venezuela, and other places. Do you think their environmental standards are better than ours or not?
Senator, I am not altogether briefed on the environmental standards of other countries currently, but I am proud that here in the United States that we have put the safety and health of our workers.
I think I can speak for all my colleagues. We're not challenging to be rude. I'm representing those families who just lost their jobs because of the cancellation of the XL pipeline, which the Obama administration science said would lower greenhouse gas emissions. And I'm trying to represent those families whose jobs are threatened by what that action indicates the Biden administration is going to do. Not based upon science, based upon a political agenda which seems to be more concerned with paying off constituency groups' expectations than lowering greenhouse gas emissions or providing employment for our fellow Americans. And that's a bitter pill to take when someone doesn't give a damn about your job because they got a political agenda and they're ignoring the science. Now, it's not your fault. You're just the appointee, and as you say, you're just the messenger. But nonetheless, I'm going to speak to some of that today and give more light to the consequences of a politically driven, non-scientific-based agenda which is costing Americans their jobs. So first, Senator Cantwell spoke about the Great American Outdoors Act. Turns out, oil and gas development in the Gulf of Mexico is what funds about 90% of it. So when Senator Cantwell was asking you to commit to funding it, and at the same time there is a threat to that revenue stream, that's kind of a way you can't answer that correctly. Your agenda of the Biden administration threatens the funding of the Greater American Outdoors Act. It also, by the way, threatens the funding for the Gulf of Mexico, the GOMESA Act, which funds coastal restoration in my state. Now, let me just say of the importance of that. By the way, when one of your predecessors, Ryan Zinke, came to Louisiana, a woman came to meet with him at a round table, and I'm quoting her. She described herself as one of the biggest liberals he would ever meet, but she understood the value of the oil and gas industry to Louisiana and more broadly to the country, given the conservation programs funded by U.S. Energy.
Let's talk about those workers and their jobs for the future, because in 2018, you campaigned on eliminating oil and gas production in New Mexico, and you were specifically asked how you would make up for the loss of oil and gas royalties, which the state uses to fund public schools, and your answer was you would vote to legalize cannabis. That was your answer. And that you said, if we legalize cannabis and we have a new funding stream for our education system, that will help tremendously. That was your statement. Do you still believe that states should replace oil and gas royalties used for public education with taxes on the sale of marijuana? Is that your position?
Well, I think the point of that ranking member was to say that we should diversify our funding streams for our education and not just rely on one.
So is selling marijuana among what the Biden administration calls better choices that the Biden administration has promised to give displaced oil and gas workers? Is that the better choice? Marijuana?
Ranking member, I honestly don't know what President Biden's stance is on cannabis currently.
But we know what your stance is on replacing the revenue from the energy jobs that power our economy and the energy that powers our country. And your preference is to turn to drugs is what you've recommended to the voters. At a time when we know when there's high unemployment and energy workers lose their jobs, we've seen it in West Virginia, we've seen it around the country, there's been an opioid crisis in this nation. And yet what I hear from you is the answer in a better choice world is marijuana.